You are listening to the Centropic Oracle, an audiobook podcast of science fiction and fantasy short stories that make you think and feel. God, Bingo and Pierogi by Frank J. Oreto. Janice opened the ornately carved doors of St. Barnabas and slipped inside the cool, quiet sanctuary. She glanced up at the enormous face of Jesus staring down at her from over the pulpit, but didn't stop to pray. She was not here to worship. She was here because of her grandmother, or Baba if you'd grown up in Pittsburgh's South Side like Janice had. This church had been part of Baba's Trinity: God, Bingo, and Pierogi. God and Bingo Janice had come along for. The call and response of the liturgy always calmed her, made Janice believe for a moment there was a plan for the world, and her life was a part of it. And Bingo could actually be fun. Not so much the game itself, but the stories Baba and the others told over cigarettes and ham barbecue. Stories they would never repeat in the house of God. The pierogi making Janice had stayed away from. Baba had chided her, especially when things turned bad with Rob. She firmly believed good cooking made a good marriage. "Come make pierogi with us," she would say, reading the worried look on Janice's face. "You feed your man, show him respect, and if that don't work so well, you feed him again." But the pierogi ladies scared Janice. They gathered every Wednesday, making hundreds of the potato and cheese-filled dumplings to sell for the church. As a child, she would peek in the large basement kitchen, watching them at their work. They'd seemed too much like the crones from her fairy tales, speaking words Janice didn't understand and cackling with laughter. They seemed even more crone-like now, all wrinkles and sagging flesh as Janice entered the church kitchen. Condolences in both English and Polish washed over her as the woman approached. "We loved your Baba so much. She will be missed." They didn't ask why Janice hadn't been at the funeral. Quick glances at her closed right eye and swollen lip advertised the answer. "Baba said Sophia should teach me to make pierogi," Janet said after the initial wave of conversation died away. "For my husband." The women said nothing for a long moment, only exchanged thoughtful glances as if years of cooking together made speech unnecessary. Finally, Ava, a round-faced woman as wide as she was tall, nodded and took Janice's hands in her own. "Of course, your Baba knew best." The crones led her to a long steel table at the rear of the room. Sophia, the oldest of them, stood alone, eyes white with cataracts, pressing dough into paper-thin circles. The women left Janice there and went back to their own mixing and shaping. Janice stood in silence, watching Sophia's rapid, dexterous movements. The woman's skin didn't sag like the others. Instead, it was wrapped around her thin bones mummy-tight. Fine wrinkles lined that skin like spidery letters in a language Janice couldn't decipher. Pregnant seconds ticked by. Was the old woman deaf as she was blind? Janice wondered. Does she even know I'm here? Without warning, Sophia's flour-dusted hands rose. Her long, thin fingers probed Janice, somehow locating each spot where Rob had hit her. With each touch, the old woman's face grew darker. Sophia spoke in Polish. Janice only understood bits and pieces of the words. However, she knew what was required. Watch. Listen. Do what I do. So, Sophia taught Janice to make pierogi, shaping dough, mixing the potato, onion, and cheese. Much of the process Janice was familiar with. She'd watched Baba perform the same steps 1,000 times in her tiny kitchen on Pius Street. But there were differences. A way of holding your left hand, 3 fingers splayed, 2 curled, as your right hand drew symbols in the scattered flour. And the words, harsh and jagged, completely unlike the Polish Janice grew up hearing. Words that made Janice's mouth tingle as if she'd eaten hot peppers, and, once spoken, fled her mind completely. Janice felt dizzy. The dough burned her hands, and odd colors flowed over the filling. She saw Rob's face, his anger. She remembered the love she'd felt for him, once so huge and all-consuming. How his rage transformed those feelings into fear and despair as miraculously as God's love transformed communion wine into blood. "He's going to kill me one day, Bubba." So, Bubba had told her what she needed to do. Janice wept, mourning the loss of her Bubba, of her marriage. The hot tears flowed down her cheeks, adding themselves to the flour, eggs, and oil. Janice blinked away the tears to find Sophia's blind eyes upon her. Rough hands found hers, stopping their motion. Janice blinked again. Her mind tingled like a sleeping limb regaining circulation. A plate stacked with half-moon-shaped pierogi lay on the table before her. Sophia spoke for the first time in English. "Not for you." As Janice walked from the church, the special pierogi covered with a napkin, she heard her Bubba as clearly as if the dead woman walked beside her. "You feed your man, show him respect, and if it work out not so well, you feed him again." A week later, there was another funeral. This one, Janice did attend. We hope you enjoyed God, Bingo and Pierogi by Frank J. Oreto, read by Larissa Thompson. If you'd like to learn more about the author and narrator of this story or make a donation to them, follow the story page link in the description. If you would like to submit a story for consideration or apply to be a narrator, a link to our submission guidelines is in the description. This story is copyrighted 2020 by the Centropic Oracle.